When this is over, we'll go out again and feel the sunshine on our faces. When this is over, we'll be able to hang out with our friends. We'll go to dinner and a show. We'll play in the park with our kids, walk through crowded streets, and even shake hands with a stranger. You know, the things we used to take for granted. When this is over, we'll live without the fear that one day this disease will win. We can't wait until this is over. ALS. It's not a matter of if we find a cure. It's only a matter of when.
Thank you for joining us for this next installation of Voices from the Sector. I'm Makia Moody with La Piana Consulting, and today I have the honor of speaking with Calaneet Balas, who has been the president and CEO of the ALS Association since December 2017. Good morning, Calaneet.
Good morning. It's nice to see you.
Likewise. I'm so excited to talk with you because I've become more intimately familiar with the work of the ALS Association by working to support your efforts on strategic planning. And it's really been illuminating since I didn't have great depth or understanding about the disease that you're working to cure. And so I wanted to start the conversation by, I imagine there's a lot of other people that aren't familiar with the ALS Association or ALS, and wanted to just get a sense from you, like, what's your introduction or elevator pitch when you meet someone and they ask, what do you do?
Right. That's always a great question. Well, what I usually say is I run the ALS Association, and sometimes there's a little pause and kind of a quizzical look. And I said, made famous by the Ice Bucket Challenge. And then there's like, oh, right, that. And then usually we get into, well, what is that really? And I tell them, it's a neurodegenerative disease, but that doesn't really tell the story. What tells the story is it's a disease that takes away your ability to move your muscles. It does it very quickly and often gets to the point where not only can you not walk, you can't move your arms, you can't type, but you can't speak and you can't breathe. So it's a disease almost opposite of Alzheimer's, where you lose the body, but you keep the mind. And that's what we're trying to cure.
Just that framing and explanation has me have chills through my body in thinking about the slow progression, as well as I'd call it trauma, the trauma that goes with not having functionality of your body and your physical being, yet your mind is still sharp as a whip and you're able to, still experience things that you can't actually make come to fruition through your physical being. Wow. So
it's one of, I think when you start to realize what it really is, it paralyzes you, right? But you're completely aware of your surroundings and you understand them. And I think for almost all of us, I would think everyone, that's terrifying.
Wow. So with that as the focus for the association, I imagine that our current global pandemic has wreaked havoc on what your organization is trying to do and how you're trying to prioritize the care services and the needs of people affected by ALS. Can you talk a little bit about how COVID-19 is influencing access to care that would normally be available through the ALS Association?
Sure. I mean, the pandemic, I think for all of us, has reframed everything, right? All of our reality and how we work. So for our organization and our community, when you have people who can have such high needs, this can be doubly, that's not a word, this can double the paralysis of getting people care. So thinking of it this way, one of the primary issues with ALS is respiratory failure. So the COVID pandemic on top of it, because of the type of virus it is really scary. So our community generally does not want anyone coming into their home They're scared to bring anything in that might have this virus, right? So getting people equipment, getting people home health aid. A lot of people need 24-hour care. And so our caregivers, our families have no respite if they're not comfortable bringing people into the home. And of course, getting people out. So again, because the risk is so high in ALS, and transportation is hard anyway, especially as the more wheelchair bound you are, the bigger the equipment of moving somebody, transporting someone, it's very difficult. So that a community that was already isolated is now even further isolated. However, we have seen, as many health sectors have seen, that uptick in technology and doing this on the screen with medical care providers. And so that has been something that's been a good thing that's come out of this, which is Congress turned on its heels very quickly when it can do that when it wants to, and allowed telemedicine to be algorithm so that we can provide some kind of medical care to people. So a combination of things, but really that isolation is really key and a key barrier to getting people care.
Mm-hmm. So telemedicine makes me think that given that Congress was so quick to act and to make that change in order to meet the needs of people, I'm wondering if there have been any other, I would categorize that maybe as a silver lining, like their ability to respond so quickly. Have there been any other silver linings that you would name within the last 4 months as the association has had to become more agile and adaptive and maybe even innovative in meeting the needs of your primary constituencies?
Yeah, I think there definitely been some silver linings. So one is our support groups. People used to go to support group physically together, right? And they would meet in a church or whatever the local community house was. And now they're doing it virtually. And we have a lot more, we have seen a tremendous uptick in the amount of people dialing in for support groups across the country. So that's been good. And with that, I've also seen almost an increased connectivity within the community, not just even within the United States, but even globally. So I'm meeting people that I never had conversations with before. And I think there's been a tremendous need for people to reach out, get information, exchange information, try to exchange resources. And we have really seized the moment in that. I've talked with new colleagues that I didn't know, from Colombia to the Ukraine, trying to get information out to their communities. So I think that kind of connectivity is a real positive outcome.
So I've heard you say that ALS is an underfunded disease. What are the most effective ways of raising more funds to find a cure, recognizing that it's a long game?
It is a long game. Well, there are a lot of ways. I think every year we do go to Capitol Hill and ask for funding. And I think that that's really important, because the funds that go into the NIH or the Department of Defense really get leveraged. And by leverage, meaning you might put $10 million in, but you're seeing $100 million leveraged out from the dollar in. So that's really important. It's not just necessarily about a single donation or a single dollar, but then how do we capitalize on those dollars? We saw that from the Ice Bucket Challenge. So for the $40 million that we had given and had completely spent, we've been a lot more, but completely spent in research, it actually leveraged 3 times the amount of dollars into the research space. So that, to me, is one of the most important things. And of course, you see, fundraisers, walks, galas, all the things that we've all seen for a long time. But I think really trying to explain to whether it's corporations or large foundations and donors how their dollars can then be leveraged into bigger impact is one of the most important things that we probably don't talk enough about.
So when you think about the resources that the philanthropic sector has to bear related to finding a cure, if you had a specific ask for philanthropy writ large, what would it be?
Great question.
Yeah, well, I'm just thinking like because you mentioned NIH and the Department of Defense. So governments, I know that the ALS Association partners significantly with government. And I'm just thinking, regular everyday citizens that are more informed and aware of the impact of this disease would likely, be more inclined to support finding a cure. But when I think about philanthropy and their treasure troves of resources, like if you had a specific ask for the philanthropic sector, what might that ask be related to helping to create a world without ALS?
So I think my answer is going to be maybe unusual. I don't know. I would ask them to be less restrictive of their donations. I think one of the biggest challenges that the space like ours, whether it's ALS or other diseases or organizations have, is the dollars that are sometimes are available are very restricted in its use. And with that, the nonprofit sector is often looked at not like a business, that somehow we shouldn't invest in our people and we shouldn't invest in the technology or the things that we need in order to really have a business that's high functioning and high value. And I would love to see in my lifetime the philanthropic sector get a little bit more up to date with how we spend our money. I do think we should be held accountable for how we spend the money, but I think it should be less prescriptive in the way that it's spelled out. I think in a lot of ways, many of my colleagues and counterparts think that those types of prescriptions have actually inhibited progress.
Less restrictions. I think it's a great answer, and perhaps maybe it is untraditional. But I do think that there's opportunities for philanthropy to figure out how to better build power and share power and wield their power in order to help organizations and their missions come to be, instead of having the handcuffs of you need to do X with this amount of money that we're giving you. So yeah, I like that answer, Calaneet. So as I think about the association, you are a vast network, 39 chapters, a national office. You are providing, in broad strokes, care services, research, and advocacy, all in pursuit of creating a world without ALS. Can you talk a little bit about, with the power of this vast network, what you have on your horizon, let's say for the next year? Like, what are you hoping to accomplish in the next year? And I'll asterisk this with, I know we're in a global pandemic.
I'm glad you put that asterisk on it. But honestly, I don't think it changes whether we're in a global pandemic or not. I guess the first thing that any organization like ours is trying to do in this particular year is to make sure that we're here in the future to continue serving our community. That's the number one most important thing, is make sure that the community continues to be served, and partner with a lot of other organizations to do that. But otherwise, I don't think our challenges are any different. We're trying to provide a continuity of care across the country and providing those services as well as we possibly can. We still have to advance research. It's critical. And now more than ever, because so many labs and others have either temporarily closed down, some things, have had to halt, some clinical trials have had to stop enrollment. So really making sure that the research sector is able to go forward is really, really important. And then the advocacy continues, and there's still a great push toward not only research investment, but making sure that people have access to treatments and therapies when they come out. Trying to make sure that people have access to potentially to what's called expanded access through the FDA, which might be an opportunity for somebody to get a treatment earlier than when it hits the market. So all of those efforts have to continue forward, pandemic or no pandemic. And that's what we're working on.
You mentioned, I think you used the word collaboratives or collaboration or partnerships as you were thinking about in that last response. I know that based on my scurrying around the new website, which is lovely, that there are a number of partners either through research or through just other touch points that the association has, where you're leveraging expertise and resources to be better together as an entire ALS community. Given the diversity within the ecosystem of ALS adjacent ALS focused organizations, I'm curious what your vision is for that entire collective.
I think it's really important that we don't duplicate our efforts. So I look at the ALS Association. We are the largest organization globally serving people with ALS, but we're not the only ones. So it's really important that we work with partners and understand what they're focused on and either try to enhance that by working together or not duplicating the efforts and letting them go do that work. So in my mind, so what I'm thinking about, for example, is lately we've been, because of the pandemic, well, not maybe because of, but maybe highlighted with the pandemic, is access to technology, right? Access to being able to do exactly what you and I are doing right now, an assumption that people have internet, an assumption they understand how to use it, that they could use technology even if we just handed it to them. And those are big assumptions that often are not the case. So we're looking with both partners that are in the ALS space, focused on technology already, and some that are completely outside of the ALS community on how we can bring that equipment and resources to people. So those are the types of things I'm thinking about when I think of partnership or collaboration of what do we do well? Are there others who might do it better? Can we partner with them to enhance an effort potentially? And can we encourage them maybe even to lead it and then move on to other things that we do well? That's kind of how I balance it in my head.
That's interesting balancing, especially because my first reaction is, wow, that takes such a self-aware and self-reflective stance to say we may not be the best organization to do this. I find that often there's organizations where the ego is so oversized that there's this orientation to it has to be us. We just have to be at the front of the pack. It has to be us. And so I'm heartened by your, I guess, philosophy of, different strokes for different folks. We might be leading in different ways as long as it's helping to get to the ultimate outcome and ultimately benefiting people affected by ALS.
It reminds me that years ago, I was working at an organization, shall remain nameless at this moment. I hadn't been there but a hot second, and a senior executive came into me and said, "So, what do you think?" And I was like, "I don't know if you want to know what I think." And I said that to him. And of course, that prompted him to say, "No, now I want to know what you think." I said, "Well, when you walk into a diner and you get a menu that's 12 pages long, you know that everything you're going to get is going to be okay. When you walk into a fine dining restaurant and you have 5 choices, you know that everything you're going to get is going to be amazing." And at this organization, I said, we're a diner, and I'd rather be a fine dining restaurant. So in my organization, there are a lot of things that we do well, but it doesn't mean we have to own everything. And if there are others who do it better, I'd rather enhance those efforts and partner with them to do it.
I look forward to using that clear example in future conversations that I have with organizations about whether or not they want to be a diner or a fine dining establishment. So many gifts already. So my last question for you is, if there's anything, like when you think about the possibilities of the future and your legacy as the president and CEO of the ALS Association, if there were something that would be the marker of that, is there anything that you would maybe want to speak into existence? Like almost like a visualization exercise, which I know we did at the beginning of our engagement. I guess what I'm going for is, when you envision the future that you and your colleagues are working tirelessly to create, what does that destination look like?
There are a whole host of things that go into what I'm about to say. I would say in 20 years, when I'm sitting on my front porch drinking my coffee, that I will be able to look at someone and say, I helped save that person's life, period, the end. I was part of that story that either pushed the research, that pushed the advocacy, that got them the ability to have access or set the expectation that a insurance company is going to cover an expensive treatment. Somehow, I was part of that narrative. And the ALS Association is either out of business, which is perfectly fine with me for the right reasons, or is still leading that charge and is bringing people together to do it.
Awesome. So now I have a follow-up question because I can do that. So what you shared about that vision is it also gave me like tingles, and it made me think of the recent campaign that's been launched, We Can't Wait, and wanted to invite you to offer, I guess, a little bit of context around that campaign before we close.
Sure, and thanks. I love this campaign. What's interesting is it started bubbling into existence as the pandemic was happening, and it really speaks to the present, but also the urgency of anybody living with ALS at any point. It's not just about we can't wait for the pandemic to be over. It's about we can't not do things. We can't hold back on our mission. We're not going to stop doing research and funding. We're not going to stop doing advocacy because our community literally cannot wait for us to do that. This disease progresses so quickly. We lose people very quickly that we have to lean in. And I keep saying ALS just doesn't stop, so we can't either. That's the premise of it. And we're inviting people to be part of our family to help us push our momentum forward so that we actually get more treatments, hopefully a cure, or enough treatments to really put this disease in its tracks and stop it. That's what we can't wait for.
Well, with that as a final point, thank you for having this conversation with me. It has been a delight.
Yes.
And I'm excited that you are at the helm of the ALS Association to chart this path forward.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. It's always fun to talk to you.
Right. Take care.
You too.